The cup was already falling when I understood what was in it. But that story doesn't start in the Great Hall. It starts 3 weeks before, in a place no one important ever went. I was 23 years old and worked in the still room, the lowest place in a castle that still has a roof. I ground bark into powder and steeped willow for fevers. I learned the difference between the herb that calms a heart and the herb that stops one. And nobody above the second floor knew my name, which suited me perfectly. I was invisible. A woman grown with quiet hands and no rank is the most invisible thing in a pack. I had spent 3 years being grateful for it. A young boy named Mass would come to the still room sometimes. He was fever-flushed and always drew the same shape on every wall. Little lightning bolts scratched in charcoal. I would smile and wipe them away, and he would draw them again. One day the steward came limping. He favored his left foot. "Ren, the king's hand needs attention. A blade that shouldn't have cut him. Come to the Great Hall." I looked up from my satchel, surprised. Me? Surely Abe. Now. I had never been to the Great Hall before. It was vast. 200 courtiers assembled. Sunlight streamed through narrow windows, illuminating stone and sword. At the far end, on the wolf throne, sat King Soren. He was 30 years old. He was terrifying. A pale scar ran from his left brow to the corner of his jaw, forked like lightning. Men in the hall kept their eyes carefully away from it. Children had been told it could see them. I knew the king the way everyone knew him. As a story, Soren of the Iron Territories had taken the throne in blood at 19 and held it for 11 years without losing it once. The proof of him was the scar. I crossed the polished stone floor. Every eye followed. I reached the dais and knelt. "Bandage it," he said quietly. I took his hand. It was warm, steady. I tried not to look at his face. I failed. The scar, up close, was not what the story said. It was thin, oddly tidy, 2 clean forks branching down from his brow. And I, exhausted, flour-dusted, accustomed to being invisible, thought something I absolutely should not think. "It's a little lightning bolt," I said before I could stop myself. The hall stopped breathing. Like the ones children scratch into frost on a window. "Sorry, it looks like a little lightning bolt." Silence. Complete. The advisors went the gray of bad fish. A goblet hit the floor, and he went absolutely still. Not angry still. Something else entirely. Something that looked like he had been struck somewhere there was no armor. After an eternity, he asked, "What is your name?" "Ren, my king," I said, bowing my head. I finished the bandaging, tied it, did not look up. I could feel him watching the top of my bent head, as if I was a word he had read wrong and was trying to read again. I rose, stepped back, waited to be told the manner of my death. "You may go," he said. I walked the entire length of that hall on legs that didn't entirely belong to me. I told myself it was over. It was not over. It had only just started. The first sign came that night. I woke to scratching at my door, my small stone chamber. I opened it. Nothing at eye level. I looked down. On the threshold lay a single dried flower, a winter rose the color of old wine, from the king's private garden, behind a locked gate. I picked it up. My hands trembled slightly. The corridor was empty except for the fading sound of something massive retreating into shadow. The next morning, there were 2 roses. Then 3. I told no one. There is no one to tell when you are a still-room girl, and the king's wolf has apparently decided to court you. You would be laughed out of the castle or hanged for the theft. So I did what I do. I observed. I withheld. And I let myself believe it would stop. It did not stop. A silver fox brooch appeared on my window. Worked metal, unmistakably from the king's own cloak. I held it, understanding dawning. Then it was my afternoon at the well. A wolf emerged from the tree line, enormous, gray-eyed. It walked straight to me and lay down across my feet, placing its enormous head in my lap. It did not move. It did not growl. It simply stayed, its eyes half closed in something that, on a smaller animal, would be called contentment. The laundry women scattered like birds. I sat very still on the well's edge, with the king's wolf breathing slow against my knee. "You're going to get me killed," I told it. The wolf sighed, a great gusting sound, and did not move. I learned later what it had cost him. The king had been in council with 40 witnesses when his own wolf stood up and walked out of him, walked through stone walls and locked doors, and lay in a kitchen girl's lap. That he had arrived at a dead run. That he had stood at the edge of the trees with his face doing something the court had never seen it do, and been entirely unable to call the animal back. A king's wolf does not disobey him. His did. His did for me in public while he stood there in front of his own people and learned the precise weight of having no authority over the one thing that mattered. I took to going to the library in the evenings. He had as good as told me to. The wolf took to lying across the door so that no one could enter and no one could leave. I read his books. I learned the man through his margins, which is the most intimate way there is to know someone. The lines he underscored, the arguments he fought in white space, the places where the proud king had written, small and fierce, knowing a hand no one was meant to see. One evening, reaching for a history of the Northern Wars to finally read the famous account of the Beast King he had slain, I found the page about the scar. It was not the story everyone told. The chronicle said the Beast King of the North had been beaten and brought to its knees. That the young King Soren, 19 years old, blood-mad and victorious, had been begged by his own commanders to take the killing strike, to take the trophy, to take the legend that came with it, and that he had not. That he had looked at the broken thing in front of him, old and frightened, in someone's father, and had lowered his blade and granted it its life and its lands and its name. Against every counsel, to the fury of his entire warband. And the Beast King, shame past bearing by the mercy, had struck up from the dirt one last time and laid the young king's face open from brow to jaw before the guards cut it down. The scar was not the mark of a kill. It was the mark of the one time he had refused to make one. 11 years he had let the whole world believe the opposite. Let them fear the gentlest thing he had ever done. Because a king who spares his enemies is a king his enemies test. And fear was cheaper to keep than respect. I sat in the firelit dark with the book open in my lap, and I understood, all at once, every still moment I had ever seen cross his face. He did not flinch from the scar's story because it was terrible. He flinched because it was a lie about the best of him told for safety, repeated until it became the only thing anyone saw. And then a flower-dusted girl had knelt down, looked straight at it, and laughed because some part of her had seen under the legend the small, bright, harmless truth. I closed the book. Something in me had gone very quiet and very certain. The amusement I had been carrying, the wry, careful distance of a woman watching a king malfunction, was simply gone. And what was left under it had edges. They had made him a monster to keep him safe. And I was not going to be one more person who let them. I went looking for Lady Sigrun the next morning instead of waiting for her to find me. That alone should tell you how far I had moved. She received me in her bright western rooms with her women around her, amused that the still-room girl had come to be put in her place. Lady Sigrun was a noble daughter of the Western line, golden and exact, raised her whole life to be the Luna of the Iron Territories. She had spent 2 years arranging herself near the king with the quiet certainty of a woman waiting for a door to open that had already been promised to her. "I know what the scar is," I said, no preamble. "I know it isn't what you tell each other." The amusement went out of her face like a candle. "So whatever you're building," I said, in a voice I did not know I had, low and level and entirely without fear, "you should know that I'm not confused about my place. I know exactly where I stand. The question is whether you do." I left before she could answer. My hands were not shaking. That frightened me more than shaking would have. I had thought I was warning her off. What I had actually done was set a clock running. Because a woman bred her whole life for a throne does not retreat when a kitchen girl finds her courage. She advances. The choosing feast was 3 nights later. The old midwinter rite, where the alpha drank the first cup before his assembled court, a cup of mulled wine and bittered herbs that every king had drunk since the founding, to show the pack his strength endured another year. The herbs were prepared in the stillroom by my hands, except they were not mine. I found that out too late. I had ground and steeped the festival herbs that afternoon and left them sealed, as I always did. What I did not know was that Lady Sigrun had been in the stillroom in the hour I went to wash. And the sealed jar that went up to the king's cup that night held, beneath my clean willow and clove, a measure of the other thing. The herb I had learned in my first year, the one that does not calm a heart, but stops it, enough to drop an ox, enough to make a king fall in his own great hall, in front of his entire court, with a still-room girl's seal on the jar, and a still-room girl's name on every tongue. I was at the back of the hall, where the low folk stand, when he raised the cup. And his wolf, which had spent 3 weeks making a public fool of him for my sake, did the last and best foolish thing it ever did. It would not let him drink. I saw it happen. Saw the king lift the cup and go suddenly rigid. Saw him fight it. Saw his own hands shake at the rim, because the animal in him had smelled, under the clove, the thing that meant death, and was trying with everything it had to wrench the cup from his mouth. He was the strongest wolf alive, and he could not make his arm obey. The hall murmured, confused, watching their king tremble at a cup he had drunk every winter of his reign. He won the war with himself for exactly the wrong second. He got the cup to his lips out of pride, because 200 wolves were watching, and a king does not falter at a right. And his wolf, denied, made the only choice left to it, and dropped him where he stood. He went down onto one knee on his own stone, the cup falling, the dark wine going out across the dais like a spreading stain. And the hall erupted. And over all of it I heard Lady Sigrun's voice, clear and grieved and ready. The still room. It came from the still room. The girl. The cup was already falling when I understood what was in it. I do not remember crossing the floor. I remember the great hall going the particular silence of a held breath. I remember the king down on one knee where no one had seen him kneel. I remember flowers still on my hands. His eyes found me before anyone could stop me. The whole court stood between us, and his advisors were shouting my name like an accusation, and Lady Sigrun was smiling her gentle, finished smile beside the dais. I knelt in front of the most feared man alive. I put my hand on the cold stone beside his, and I said the thing I was not supposed to know. It's monkshood, wolfsbane in the cup, and if you want your king to live, you will bring me charcoal and strong vinegar, now. Edric, to his eternal credit, did not waste a breath wondering whose side I was on. He moved. What followed was not gentle, and it was not dignified. Wolfsbane is a cruel poison, and it was already cold in him. I could feel it when I got his face in my hands and made him look at me. The chill of it driving down into him like frost finding the cracks in stone. His great body fighting a thing that wanted to stop his enormous heart. I had treated it once in a farmhand and lost him. I knew exactly how this went, and exactly how little time the knowing bought me. Stay with me, I told the king of the Iron Territories, on the floor of his own hall, with the whole court watching a stillroom girl give her sovereign orders. You spared a beast king on a battlefield at 19. You do not get to die of a cup. Stay. His gray eyes held mine. The frost pushed harder. I felt it surge, felt the cold of it crawl up my own arms where I held him. And I held on through it and made him drink the charcoal and held on and did not let go of his face. And somewhere in the longest hour of my life, the cold began, grudgingly, to lose. When his heart steadied under my hands, the hall was so silent I could hear the fire. The king got up off the floor slowly, with both hands, the way he set down a cup. He looked at the spilled wine, at the jar Edric had brought down from the dais, at Lady Sigrun, who had stopped smiling. And then, the proud king of the Iron Territories did the thing that they still speak of in the Western provinces. He took the plain old chair from beside the wolf throne, the second chair, the one no servant was allowed to remove. And he carried it down off the dais himself, through the parted court. And he set it on the floor beside me, both hands. This was my mother's, he said to the hall, but watching me. It has stood empty beside that throne for 11 years because I would not give the place to anyone I did not trust with the territories and my own life both. Tonight, a still-room girl gave me orders on the floor of my own hall and saved that life, and was right. He turned to the court, and the scar caught the firelight, the small, bright, forking thing, and for once he wore it like exactly what it was. Her name is Wren. You will learn it. And the next person who speaks of confusion in my wolf will explain to me why it knew the truth about all of you a season before I did. Lady Sigrun did not get a trial in the Great Hall. She got something quieter and worse. Stripped of her name and her western lands by dawn, sent north under guard to the lands of an old enemy who owed the king a long-standing debt, to live out her life as exactly the thing she had tried to make of me. A person with no rank that anyone could see. He found me in the still room 3 nights after, which no king had ever done. Ducking his head under the low door, too large for the room by half. Holding, I am not making this up, a winter rose he had clearly cut himself badly from his own garden. My wolf usually handles this part, he said. He does it better. He doesn't bleed on them, I said. He handed me the rose. There was a thorn scratch across his thumb. I took the rose. I took the hand too after, and looked at the small, careless wound, and did not let go of it. I should have told you the truth about the scar myself, he said, before you found it in a book. I have not said it aloud in 11 years. I had forgotten there was anyone I would want to say it to. Say it now. He did. Standing in the lowest room in the castle, with his head bent under my ceiling and his hand in mine, the king of the Iron Territories told a still-room girl the true story of the gentlest thing he had ever done. The one that had cost him his face and given the world a monster to be frightened of. I was 19, he said, blood-drunk from battle. The Beast King was broken at my feet, old and frightened. My commanders begged me to take the trophy, to take the legend, to take the killing strike. And I looked at him, and I could not. I lowered my blade. I granted him his life, his lands, his name, against every counsel, to the fury of my warband. And because I showed him mercy, because I could not make myself kill him, he struck me. Out of shame, out of desperation, he opened my face from brow to jaw, and I let the world believe it made me a monster. I let them fear the gentlest thing I had ever done. Because fear is cheaper to keep than respect, and a king his enemy's test will fall. But you looked at it and you laughed like it was nothing to be frightened of, like it was a little lightning bolt. When he finished, there was a long quiet. The warm kind. The kind that feels like a held hand. Then he kissed me. And what broke open inside me when he did was everything I had been holding 3 careful paces back from since the day I knelt and laughed. Every wry distance, every "it will stop," every reminder of my place, all of it simply gone. And under it, the plain astonishing fact that the most feared man alive had crossed the whole length of his kingdom to stand in the smallest room in it, because that was where I was. He rested his brow against mine, the lightning bolt scar against my skin, and neither of us said anything clever for quite some time. And his wolf, somewhere, was insufferably pleased with itself. Half a year later, I sat in my mother-in-law's chair beside the wolf throne, with flowers still somehow on my hands. Because a Luna of the Iron Territories may run the still room if she likes. And I did like. And the court adjusted. The court always does. Mass, the fever pup who had drawn lightning bolts on every wall I had ever scrubbed, now drew them openly on the dais steps. No one stopped him. Because the king had crouched down beside him once, in full view of the hall, and shown him the real one. And let the boy compare. A letter came that spring from the northern lands. The spared beast king's grandson now ruled in peace. It was addressed, it turned out, not to Soren, but to me, thanking the Luna for a mercy 2 generations old that the king had never once claimed credit for. I read it aloud to him. He set his cup down with both hands and looked at the fire for a while and did not say anything, which from him was a great deal. People still lower their eyes from the scar. Old fear is slow to die, and I have stopped trying to hurry it. But sometimes, in council, when the room has gone grave and frightened, and every face has turned to the legend on the throne for permission to be afraid, I catch his eye across all of it. And I let one corner of my mouth go, just slightly, the way you do at a private joke. A little lightning bolt, my face says. And the most feared man in the territories, who froze the first time and has never quite recovered, has to look very hard at the table to keep his own face in order. He never manages it. That is the part the stories will never get right. And the part I would not trade for any throne. That I am the one person alive who can make the king of the Iron Territories lose. Completely and in public. The war with his own face. End.